Okay, we will make a start. Right on the button. Well, welcome and thank you for joining me this morning. To set some context, for every $200 million in project value in engineering and construction, you can build a tower of printed documents, forms, schedules, models, printed out. You can stack those up and you will get 6 stories high for every $200 million. I would suggest for just the projects alone we've got going in Melbourne right now, if we printed and built that tower, we'd probably get close to one of the lighting towers here at the MCG. Now just imagine all of the discrete elements of data that now sit within that stack. All the data that's gathered every day from a project controls perspective through the entire life cycle of that project. And you start to get an idea of the challenge that's faced when you're trying to understand, interpret, and turn that data into something meaningful, and ultimately draw that through to the point of forming knowledge around a project. At Innate, we address those challenges every day, and what I'd like to do today is just take you through some of the thought behind that, give you some insight into how AI is being applied in our BASIS tool, and talk to you a little bit more broadly about the application of data and taking that through to form true project knowledge through the life cycle of mega projects and any project for that matter in engineering and construction. So today, without question, we are in the era of mega projects. We are in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime investment by government to address a shortfall in infrastructure for a growing population. And that's not just something that's occurring as a trend here in Australia, but it's nevertheless very prevalent here. But it's a global phenomenon and something that we're very conscious of, certainly within the APAC region. Just last Wednesday, Scott Morrison talked about some advanced spending on the $100 billion 10-year plan for mega projects and major projects in Australia. So they're going to be part of our landscape for the next decade and well into the future as well. The other challenge that we face is that we are very good at creating data and creating information. Everyone's used to being surrounded by information and data these days, and it's become much easier. And in the project environment, that makes the challenge of anyone in project controls that little bit harder, because now everyone's an expert in creating information and data that you can pull in, and the challenge is then, what do you trust, what do you use? You can create and fill in a form, you can list the materials inventory, you can extract schedule elements, you can update the model, you can revise the drawing, you can do all those things in the click of a button, and suddenly you've got more information to try and digest and make sense of. And that's no more confusing than in the phase of estimating and scheduling and planning. So this all leads to the need to tame the data beast and gain control. Reducing the risk is not just about what you know, it's what you can learn from it and what you can share. Because in the end, we're talking about projects now that have many hundreds of collaborating individuals and a number of entities that want to understand and interpret that information. So being able to share it is just as important as being able to capture it. Some familiar headlines, as I'm sure you will be very aware, that unprecedented era of investment that we're seeing is presenting some challenges. And it's something that we in Innate are helping our clients to avoid every day. The financial pressures and the debate surrounding the distribution of risk around projects is one that I also think is very interesting. And I believe there's a chance for us to shift those headlines and start thinking about that question that's become very political, which is who should own the risk? And I see an equally large question in addressing who should own the data and who can provide the rational insights to sensibly reduce those risks. Interestingly, I believe there's a role for both the owner and the contractor in that space, and we have conversations every week about how to apply that data and where there's value in taking that data and owning that and providing those insights that will deliver benefit. Done well, of course, there's a chance for both parties to realise commercial and reputational benefit. So enabled by technology, as I mentioned, we have become very, very good at creating data. Everyone's become an expert in creating volumes of information, packaging it in various systems with numerous vendors supplying different stacks of data. In theory, all of that could be pulled together, but the reality is all too clear for anyone working in project controls today. Many vendors will reference the potential to consolidate and pull that data into a CDE, common data environment, but we at Innate are delivering on that, and I believe best placed to continue that vision. Further, there's a client base there to prove it. So as part of what I'm going to show you today, we are going to look at a little bit of how Basis as a scheduling tool is enabling that. Just to set some further context, looking at this in terms of how we distribute the data and the decisions that take place on a project. Now imagine this on a major project where you have this amplified across all of those sub-projects, with all of the contributing parties' activity feeding in to this flow of data and information that's collected at various points. The capital projects and construction sector is, unfortunately, a laggard in adopting that technology. Those of you that have come across from different sectors, particularly manufacturing, will understand how well data is applied in different industries, and just some of the rapid take-up that we're now starting to see as the engineering and construction industry adopts technology and looks at ways to actually leverage it to gain greater insights from that data. And we've achieved that already by bringing data together, and not just from our solutions. Many times we're looking at integrations with other systems that help people to consolidate that information and analyse it. The analytics and harnessing the information is really what's key to this. Querying it in such a way to provide those knowledgeable insights and seeing how it can be done. And as an example, we have major rail projects here in Victoria that are saving weeks of man-hours every month now by bringing data together and creating dashboards to replace multi-page documents that were being pulled together from very complex Excel spreadsheets. And I'll talk a little bit more about exactly how that's being done as well. So just to give you a bit of context again on a guiding principle for us in terms of how we see the need to take that project data and refine it to a point where you can gain those knowledgeable insights. First of all, helping clients effectively gather the data in the field, and whether that's through the various discrete phases of estimating and design and into construction. Next, ensuring that information is in a trusted source and accessible and managed, not just collected, being a key difference in respect to turning that into information. And finally, consolidating that, and by using analytic tools and AI, in many cases, turning that into what becomes the client organisation's intellectual property. It becomes the methodology of construction firms and owners who are interested in developing more predictable project outcomes and more profitable projects as a result. And I think that's one of the key things here, is understanding the value of it. That this isn't just about gaining insights into data for the sake of it, but it's about developing insights that enable you to have IP and a methodology that leads to more profitable outcomes for your projects. All right, so AI. How can AI help? Well, AI is, of course, as many of you will know, getting a computer to mimic how humans think and process some of those issues that we face on project controls. But it doesn't replace the planner or the scheduler. They still need to have ownership, and that's a key theme in the way that we develop solutions that truly work for people in the industry. It's not about replacing, it's about enhancing. If we look at the neural networks and the role they play in terms of some of those knowledge library elements, providing the structure that will help you to form a decision. But what they don't do is provide the reasoning behind the suggestions or the identification of that solution or that decision point. So the real magic there is in those inference engines that sit in the middle, the elements of the software that learn and then suggest. Personally, I think one of the best examples of that outside construction would be Google Maps, in terms of the minute you pull out your driveway at 7 a.m. in the morning, it's telling you that it's 55 minutes to work and this is the way you should go. Understanding the patterns of behaviour and applying those to those knowledge libraries, whatever they may be, and putting them into context. So your inference engine returning a suggestion based on context. And it's that we use in Basis to provide insights and improve the process of scheduling and planning. So just to dig a little bit deeper on that and give you an example within it. So a key aspect and a key benefit of using solutions such as Basis to do this is to allow you to rapidly template and use those subnets to generate a schedule with some intelligence and with some insight. So those subnets, the chunk of the schedule, traditionally very difficult to grab those and isolate them. And to cut and paste them into a project is next to impossible. You can't do it. It's out of context. You can't just drop that in and you need to then go and recreate it. So all of those data points and all of those insights are typically stored in the mind of the scheduler. And they remain individual IP as opposed to something that's shared throughout an organisation. So a different way to approach this, and the way that we've done it with Basis, is to look at how that software can remember those links. And I liken this to more of a transplant in a medical field, where it's the vessels and the connection points that you're now identifying that allow that organ to become functional as it's connected to the various muscles, tendons and vessels that make it a living, breathing thing. And projects are exactly that. You need to be able to create those links and have a tool that can identify where those points connect so that you can put them into that schedule as a chunk and save considerable time, but bring knowledge from previous experience. So in the example here, we're looking at some steel work that's being suggested should take place. Now it's in red because the suggestion from the software tool and Basis here is that it's in the wrong place, that if you're working through that concrete pour section, that the steel work really should already have taken place. So perhaps you want to think about moving that before you drop that into the schedule. So it's a very simple example of where the AI comes in place as an augmented piece of intelligence to help people make better decisions and avoid making errors in the way that schedules are put together. So in very simple concept, what we do there is to capture the data, develop those insights, and take the insights that come from past experience and apply those facts and what is front and centre for planners today to create more predictable outcomes. So this is where the power of AI comes into play, offering those examples of the past experience to help guide the decision making for now and the future, contributing to that. And as we move through, I'll explain a little bit more about how that takes place through the entire project lifecycle. But when you think about sharing the knowledge and collaboration, again, you have to remember this is a human task. And software is not going to replace what humans do in terms of providing decisions to projects. And one of the most important things that we see needing to happen is to actually bring that into a collaborative environment and to make sure that you can share and get buy-in from the various stakeholders that are working on a project. It's augmented intelligence, and that's great to calibrate your plan. However, there's a need to validate it, and with that human participation. So what we see here is the way that you can gather inputs in a simple way, and by encouraging people to essentially vote on what they see and score with colour coding to bring that into play and allow the scheduler to then make an informed decision on whether they want to adjust the schedule based on the consensus view or stick with the original plan. But that collaborative approach and taking people out of silos and removing the secret pocketbooks of schedules and tricks and tips and realising the value for the project and for the organisation is one of the key things we see being a benefit, and what we're hearing in terms of feedback from our client base is that ability to take these insights and actually turn it into intellectual property for the benefit and the growth of the organisation. Because the days are gone when a single person can retain all the knowledge on a project and where you have a single scheduler or planner who's going to be able to work through the entire life cycle of that project. So being able to bring that into the intellectual property of the organisation is increasingly important, and that's another key benefit of using software tools and AI in order to bring that into play. So having gone into a bit of detail there, I also just want to share with you where some of those other key data points across the whole project lifecycle come in. Because for us, it's not just about any single phase of the project, it's about looking at this through the entire project lifecycle, from the very initial concept all the way through to handover and into asset management. And what we're seeing today is how our clients are using the various data points and our tools to pull that into play, whether it's in our analytics tools or whether it's in the use of Power BI. But bringing that information together so that you can share information and gain instant insights is where there is real power in data. Remember that stack of, imagine that lighting tower height stack of printed documents and being able to thumb through any length of document to try and gain some insights on a monthly basis. The difference between that and being able to log into a dashboard and see that on a daily basis in almost live real time. So there's no substitute for that instantaneous access to insights and turning data into knowledge. And that is what we see as one of our key challenges and one of the objectives that we seek to reach every day with our client base as we look at taking data and turning it into actionable knowledge. One of the other big things that come into play as we look at this is investing in that digital engineering piece. In Australia and globally, we're encouraged to see that some of the most forward-thinking owners and contractors are adopting this approach. And it's not just on the contractor side. There's an interesting debate going on, as I mentioned, about who should own the data and who owns the risk. And for us, we're seeing a very interesting shift in owners of projects who want to and understand the value of owning that data. They understand that it's not about a stack of paper that's handed over at the end and put on the shelf. That today, project data is a very live and dynamic thing that exists through the entire project life cycle. And projects, and not just projects, but assets, have a life cycle that go well into decades in many cases. So it's not about simply building and walking away. We need to think about these mega projects now as assets with a life cycle and data that needs to be accessed throughout the entirety of their life. So we're seeing that vision being adopted. Victorian Government's digital asset strategy, New South Wales, TFNSW in their DE strategy, in our view, very forward-thinking and helping to shape some benchmarks and standards nationally that will influence the region and just bring things together in terms of understanding how projects need to be managed. They're also starting to set some benchmarks in that for contractors, and there's an interesting relationship between what the contractors are delivering in terms of digital information and digital engineering, how they're leveraging that, and the relationship of that data ownership between the owner and the contractor. And what we're seeing is those very nimble contractors who are able to invest in a forward-thinking approach, adopting the tools and applying the learnings of the data to help improve their IP, as I mentioned before. So another key part of this, as we get away from just the pure planning and scheduling that I want to share with you, is how that information feeds into a model environment. So within a model, we've been very conscious to see where we can pull that information in, and we're starting to see that integration take place, so that it's not just about the model solution in isolation, but it's looking at those schedule elements and bringing that into play so you get visibility across the different stages and the different elements of a project in one environment. And bringing those into play with consistency. So yes, it's from a common data environment, and yes, you're sharing the same information, and there's an element of dynamic input as things are changing and adapting on a day-to-day basis. But being able to pull all that together for that asset information model is what we see being increasingly important. And again, there are huge volumes of data here that are being updated and modified on a minute-by-minute basis. So making sure that you've gathered your schedule and your document control and your in-field solutions and bringing that together in one place, making it available for all stakeholders and not just those who are using the native modelling tools. So there's a real shift that we're observing in the way that that happens. One of the key things here is to understand that it's not an isolated event, that this is something that takes place throughout the whole project life cycle. So applying that project intelligence and being able to see where that's added to as it's a continuous process. So that data is gathered, aggregated and continuously enriched through the whole project life cycle. So again, with basis and in scheduling, we're very keen to emphasise how that is not seen as something that's an isolated task that occurs at the beginning of the project. It's something that's occurring and is dynamic throughout the entire project life cycle. And as you can see in that curve, as it upward trends through to the right-hand side, in those various phases of risk planning and project cost management, you're seeing that enrichment of data is represented in that chart, just to show how it provides you with further insights for that project in isolation as a discrete activity, and then how that information feeds back into the organisation to help make more informed decisions on the next project and the next project. So what we're doing is helping those project owners and delivery partners and contractors to retain that refined data point and create knowledge that, again, becomes part of that IP. And I'm emphasising that point because it's so critical to where we see the clients that we work with having value in using the solutions. It's helping them improve and enhance their IP that they own, it's their data, to get best use of it and apply it to their business to get more predictable and profitable project outcomes. So to summarise, we have solutions that can organise and take data forward and provide insights and knowledge. And all of that is designed to assist decision making and ultimately address the objective that every one of our clients today identifies, and that is to create more predictable and more profitable project outcomes. And that's the reason for wanting to take data from being that raw source to a refined set of insights that you can apply to your organisation, and as owners you can retain and recognise as part of the asset value. So it's a process, but it's one that allows you to, in the end, enhance the value of every single project, either as a contractor or as an owner. Thank you for your time. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about the technical nature of Basis or any of the other solutions, then please do come by the stand. The team there, who are far more knowledgeable than me in the ins and outs and backgrounds of how all of that works, will be very happy to take you through those projects and products and give you some further insights. Thank you.